when you get started. Okay, it is with great pleasure to introduce our dinner speaker, who is a great and well-renowned member of our South Texas section and also the wider AICHE national community. His name is Tom Rehm, who's going to talk to us about how to minimize the detrimental effects of human bias on climate solutions. Very relevant, okay, because this is a human problem. It's not only a technology problem. It's not an economic problem. It's not a market or policy problem. But nevertheless, this kind of challenging topic deserves a very capable and accomplished speaker. So I was going to say, I was thinking earlier, the biggest accomplishment that, or distinction that Tom has, he's as distinguished as a professional before retiring as after retiring. He's done so many things after retiring. Of course, you had a very long and a distinguished career. I think we're admired to see what you're doing with forming your own organizations, and of course, you're going to tell us more about it. But let's start with his regular career before retiring from Saudi Aramco in 2009. He had, of course, international experience. He spent 12 years in Saudi Arabia, and as a chemical engineer, he studied at University of Arkansas, and with a bachelor's, and then he got his master's and PhD at Northwestern. When he retired from Aramco, he started getting involved, like we all do here, with the AICHE, and among the things he did, he was a human resource officer and chair in 2019, and that's actually when I met Tom, because he was doing all these captivating speakers and presentations and writing the wonderful things about in the newsletter. And actually, I have to say, in retrospect, that's probably what pulled me back. I was a little bit uninvolved with STS, and I think you pulled me back to STS. Yeah. And by coincidence, actually, you were the one who called me to run for chair-elect last year, or the year. Yeah, so, so guess here. That's one of his mistakes, but no, it's okay. You know, no one's perfect, you know. All right. Okay, for the thing that really stands out for now is actually he's really involved in several initiatives on climate solutions. We know all, of course, the climate solutions community. How many people are members under AICHE to the climate solutions community? Okay. Well, there's potential for more. And Tom may tell us more about it, but if you don't, then you go to the website or reach him after the talk. But he also co-founded the so-called Global Solutions and Outreach programs. And he's really working on grassroots ways for people to get involved with solving the climate change problem. We have some other distinguished speakers here and participants. I would like to point out Jimmy Kumana here, who had been giving a lot of outreach presentations in the community from what I understand about what climate change means and how we solve it and everything. And that's probably a role we all have. We don't have all the answers, we don't have all the solutions, but at least we have some of the knowledge that could be used to address it and maybe even argue on the sense whether it exists or not. I think the memberships of Tom, you can see this AICHE, ACS, American Society for Advancement of Science, Nuclear Society, and so forth. Of course, he says his claim to fame is playing very good billiards. So I need to challenge you on a game one day, you know. And that's fine, yeah. Of course not, because I'm going to lose anyway. So if you beat the national champion, I'm not going to stand against him. But I want to also say that Tom is joining us today with his lovely wife, Mary, who's really an affiliate AICHE member, because she's in most of our meetings. And actually, I love it. And it's like, this is what we do with our spouses. Bring them over. Bring them a husband or wives. I think that's really not about only the technical and the presentation, but it's also about the social and the networking. Yeah, Exactly. That's how we can reach 100. Let's do that. So let's give a round of applause for Tom and then welcome him to the podium.
Well, I'm a farm boy from Arkansas, and that was a mouthful right there. Thanks for that introduction, Andreas. So I am involved in several climate solution initiatives. On the screen are 5 of the most important, in my opinion, and ranked in order of importance. I'm going to talk about how we can minimize the effects of human biases, and the Global Solutions and Outreach programs will do that. And this is a new concept. We're trying to get the word out to as many people as we can, and when I say get it out, I mean internationally. We've had people from several countries already attend our briefings. The other ones are also very important, and I'm in the leadership of all these. Now, I was in Phoenix for the annual meeting, and at that meeting I made 2 presentations which talked about the same subject, and I went through every climate solution initiative that I'm involved with, and I told them that each one is encumbered by human biases. I concluded by giving a description of global solutions and outreach programs, which will mitigate those biases. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Now, you all were given a handout. You should have a handout in which I came up with a concept I call the 7 levels of climate grief. And on that handout, you'll notice several plots of temperature data from states. Back about 5 years ago, a colleague of mine here in Texas became concerned that I was concerned about global warming. And of course, he didn't think there was anything to it. He says, you know, Tom, and his argument was, Tom, it's always been hot in Texas. And my first thought is, well, you know, you're right. It's always been hot in Texas. I first came here Mary and I first came here in 1993, and it was hot then. And so I just figured out that there was a place that had temperature data, NOAA database, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association database, and I did a few plots, and darn it, it's getting hotter in Texas. And you'll see on that handout that a plot shows Texas is getting warmer by about 1.3 degrees Fahrenheit every 50 years. Now, this has become a hobby of mine. Mary will see me at my computer, and she'll. I take a break from doing hard thinking by plotting more data, and so she'll see a plot, and she'll say, "Oh my gosh, more blue dots, more blue dots," and but I thought that well, I wonder how people around the country, what their opinion is of the problem, global warming problem. And so I found this study by Yale in 2021, and they asked a question which is on that sheet there, and I put the states together, the ones that had the least concern about global warming. I said, well, let's put them in grief level 1, denial. And so those are the first states I looked at as far as temperature rise and so on, as you can see there. I think that those who are concerned about global warming and want to do something about it have put a lot of hope in grief level 6, the Adam Smith mirage. Adam Smith's invisible hand will save us. Well, that's the trust. And I and my colleagues in Global Solutions and Outreach Program say, we don't really think so. And we need to do one thing, and that is the human biases which play a major factor in grief level 6, trusting in business as usual, we need to figure out a way to mitigate that effect. So now, we need to address some fiction. The fiction is that we don't have a problem. And I just want to put this to bed right now. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it's important. That darn medieval warming, boy, that's all we're seeing is medieval warming. That's the cyclic problem. Well, the data has been plotted up. In central England, there was warming. It's that red circle there you see on that upper left plot. The temperature rise, that's the fastest period of temperature rise, was 0.9 degrees over 50 years in central England. But of course, that is used by those who want to make the argument that that represents a global temperature rise. Well, it wasn't. Then there's the argument, well, gosh, there have been periods where it's been much warmer on the planet. And yes, our dinosaur friends enjoyed a weather that was much, much warmer. And if you take a look at this plot, the steepest rise, and I admit that this is just eyeballing it, but the steepest rise, if you carefully look at this plot, is 1 degree Celsius over 1 million years. Well, I think even humans could make that transition without any problem at all. So, and this is a list of the temperature increases for the 13 states that I have plotted. This is just a first pass. But if I go back to this, I intend to produce 7 papers. I'm actually going to be talking with a publisher next week. And Mary doesn't know that yet, so that's what I'm going to be doing, Mary, with my next project. I'll still be doing blue dots. So let me just, this is the last national climate assessment. I understand there's another one coming out soon, but this was in November of 2018. And the very first figure in this, in the executive summary, and this report was well over 1,000 pages, had this plot, which has been criticized as hysterical. It can't be true. A 1.6 degree Fahrenheit rise over 50 years, and it is true. Here are the states again, half of them match that or exceed it. And by the way, when I do publish the first paper, it's very simple. I'll just give directions. Anybody on the planet can go to NOAA, look up your favorite little town. By the way, I grew up in a town in Arkansas called Morrilton, and that was the first one I went to, and there are places that actually show cooling, and Morrilton is a cool place. It's cooling. Anyway, this data is a little bit stochastic, but the trend is obvious. Okay. Now, are we making any gains on trying to solve our global problem? This is CO2 measurement data from Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii. Every single day, a new point is added. The troughs are in the summer when CO2 is consumed in the northern hemisphere by all of our plant life, and the peaks are at the other end of the year. Are we making any progress? So I say we're not. Now, we have been fairly diligent for, this goes back about 10 years. Haven't we been diligent in the last 10 years? But we're making no progress. One of my colleagues puts it a very succinct way, and he's fairly renowned. Monty Alger, he's a professor at Penn State University, worked in industry for most of his career, just been at Penn State for about 9 years. He was the president of AICHE in 2020. He said, Tom, we're not doing anything. We're not making any progress. No progress. Whatever we're doing now is not accomplishing anything. Whoops. And it can be explained partially. I got to look at my notes here. I can't remember everything. Let's see. Our demand for energy is increasing. That is one of the problems we're facing. And that is to be expected. Other countries would like to have our lifestyles. That's all very understandable. It's hard for you to read all these numbers. Let me just look at my notes here. So between 2010 and 2021, energy demand grew by 33%, and it's going to continue to grow. Now, with that continued growth, how in the world are we ever going to catch up and solve this problem, which, of course, goes back to the generation of that energy. Now, you're going to find out that I am not pro-renewable. I think there's a place for renewables, but we have to be wary, and you'll see that in my presentation. Between 2010 and 2021, electricity generation by solar and wind increased 760% during that period. Okay? Now, if we go out 10 more years, it might increase another substantial amount. And of course, energy demand will also increase. So are we going to solve that problem? Now, there's a lot of human bias associated with decision making on what ought to be done to solve our planetary problem. And there's a lot of bias, maybe some here would agree, in the opinion that solar and wind are going to save the day. Let's just do it full out all over the planet, and we're going to save the day. There's hydrogen, yes, there's other solutions, but this is in the public mind. Now, the Adam Smith invisible hand, hope, is that with the marketplace and with the right incentives and with this unbounded faith in renewables, we shouldn't really have to worry. The problem is going to be solved, but I don't think that that's going to be the case. Now, here's something we're fighting, those of us who are working on climate solutions, and that is what I call, I coined this, the Inhofe snowball confusion. Now, in the summer here in Houston, I think there are a lot more people who are believers in global warming. It's hot here. But gosh, don't we have wonderful weather this time of year? I mean, it's great. Mary and I spent 12 years in Saudi Arabia. It's very hot there in the summer, but the winter was beautiful. I mean, you could go golfing every day. The high temperature was 70 or 72. Best weather we ever experienced for like 4 months straight. So we have a lot more people concerned in the summer than we do in the winter. And this is, once again, sort of a human thing. We're just distracted. We sort of our thinking might change off and on because of these sorts of things. Those of us who feel like we're working on climate solutions year-round, we've tried to be accommodating. There are many that went over to Egypt this year. This cartoon was was just after the COP meeting, Conference of Party meeting in Glasgow the previous year. And this brave warrior, he said, let's see if I got it written down here. What did he say? He said to climate change, We had a very big climate conference this year, and if you do not relent, I warn you, we will have another. And I think we need to be a bit more forceful than that. Those of us who are warriors on trying to do something about climate. So I want to introduce Dick Hutchinson. I actually have a picture of him in a backup slide. I'll throw it up later. Dick Hutchinson worked his career for the U.S. Army at Aberdeen Proving Ground. His focus was chemicals. I don't know all the details, but he's a chemical engineer. And we all remember in the 1980s what happened over in the Middle East. Iraq and Iran had a war. Iraq used chemical weapons against the Iranians in the war. Many people died from those chemicals. And then he used them against the Kurds in his own country. And because of that was near the end of the 1980s. The people who called Geneva Convention said, we ought to get together and figure out what ought to be done. And in conjunction, and that started in 1990 and ended in 1993. And the U.S., of course, was part of that. And the U.S. decided, well, we need to get something started on this right away. And they funded a project which Dick Hutchinson led, about 270 professionals. Took them 3 years to figure out how the U.S. Can best protect itself against chemical and biological terrorism. And in that work, Dick Hutchinson and the others who were in the leadership used the wicked problem approach to do that work. Dick retired in the early 2000s, talked his wife Lorraine into going up to Maine. He's a backwoodsman now, 25 acres. Mary and I visited them about a year ago. Anyway, he thought, he convinced other scientists and engineers that he knew that this wicked problem approach might be a good method to use to do something about global warming, because he saw the attributes of it. And they formed a group called the Stable Climate Group about a dozen years ago. And then he decided to write a book to describe how it could be used. He published that book in 2019 and then sent a letter out to every U.S. University Chemical Engineering Department in the U.S., about 160. Sent them a copy of the book and a letter, and he may have heard back from 3 or 4. These universities are very busy people, you know. You send them to the chairs of every department. Well, at North Carolina State University, the chair knew that Phil Westmoreland, who had been the 2013 president of AICHE, might have an interest in this. Phil's been very active in the Public Affairs and Information Committee. And Phil, in the summer of 2019, knew that I was involved with the launch of the AICHE Climate Solutions Community. So he read the letter and saw the book, and he sent me an email. He said, Tom, you need to get in touch with this fellow in Maine and find out what he's up to. So that's what I did, and we started talking. So this is the book that Dick wrote. He actually, this other fellow, Darrell Smith Jr., I got to know him. He's a member of the Stable Climate Group. He really didn't write a darn thing, but Dick thought it would lend more credibility if Darrell sort of went in. He wrote the book, and he sent it to all the other people in the Stable Climate Group, and he says, review this, tell me what you think. And Darrell provided the most feedback, so he put him on there as an author. Anyway, but Dick and I started talking in 2019, and by the end of 2020, so about a year and a half later, we decided that we ought to hold some webinars so he can explain the wicked problem approach. In early 2021, we did that. We held a series of webinars, and we arrived at a group of about 30 who thought this was important. And so with that 30, we began to figure out how to put the word out. And so this is a website that we built. We beta tested it in late 2021, and this is a welcome from me and Dick. And Dick basically put out the concept that in the webinars that we have a lot of human biases that detrimentally affect decisions on climate solutions. Public passions, and that would be advocacy groups that where the leaders and dedicated members spend a great amount of effort to promote a certain opinion on how to solve this problem. Anyone who dedicates their lives to it are biased. They're good people, but they're biased. Vested interest. Monty Alger tells me, now he's a professor at Penn State, he says, we got lots of old chemical engineering professors who have been working for years in a certain little niche and trying to improve batteries or solar panels or whatever it might be, and that's where they are. And they get money for doing that work, and they're going to write a paper, and they're going to get money for doing that work. So they are vested in that line of thinking. Any company or individual who puts a lot of money into a climate solution is going to be interested in promoting that solution. There's nothing wrong with these biases. It's all natural. And politicians want to get reelected. It's natural. So, are we going to let those who have these biases run the show, or are we engineers going to do something to mitigate that? So this is a snapshot after we had gone through our webinars in 2021. So this is January of 2022, and we had about 30 members of our development committee, and you can see their professions, mostly engineers and scientists, and that's probably just because Dick and I are two chemical engineers, and so those are the crowds we hang out with. And we decided to promote the global solution outreach programs, that we needed to perhaps look at different sectors of the economy, society, industry, and so on, and we brainstormed various different sectors. And at that time, we were focused on 4 of them: governments, insurance, philanthropies, and climate action organizations. Moving ahead about 7 months, we had more. We gained another 30 people. And we added more sectors, 8 altogether, and made an attempt to try to work in those areas to figure out what the challenges of each sector would be, and how we could convince them that global solutions and outreach programs can actually help them. Now, I want to move on to, and this is where, some here may get their feathers a little ruffled, but there are some major efforts on the planet to figure out what ought to be done, and I just want to talk briefly about them. That would be Project Drawdown. That's very well known, Project Drawdown. Deep Decarbonization Pathways Project, and then the last bullet, a Harvard review of 40 different decarbonization projects. And we think that each of these, the first 2 is deficient, and I want to point out some conclusions of the Harvard review. So when the Project Drawdown book came out in 2017, I bought it immediately, read it, and I thought, well, this is a very nice library, very nice catalog of solutions, but any intersecting issues between them are not really addressed. There are major intersecting issues between very complex subsystems. For example, electricity generation and distribution, transportation. They have very complex intersecting issues. Manufacturing, complex intersecting issues, and so on. So Project Drawdown, though, this was a start in 2017. It was a lot of contributors, but it was a good catalog of a lot of different solutions. If I can get this thing to work. There it goes. Now, I tell everyone, okay, even though the Global Solutions and Outreach Program proposal is quote-unquote agnostic, I want to be upfront and say that I don't think we can solve our planetary problem without a significant increase in nuclear power. We just can't do it. It won't happen. I just wanted to point out here, for Project Drawdown, they decided, for some reason, that advanced reactors, which I don't know if you have done some reading in nuclear technology, they're called Generation 4, and not light water reactors. Advanced reactors are out of scope, just not going to consider it. And one of the reasons is that there will be no advanced reactors commercial. It's an absolute certainty until next decade. So if your assumption is that we need to solve this problem by 2030, well, okay, forget it. Not going to do anything with advanced nuclear reactors. Can't be done. Okay, come on. Okay, now, they are very supportive of solar photovoltaics. They assume that distributed solar photovoltaics can grow from 180 terawatt hours of electricity generation. By the way, this is right off of their website right now. 180 terawatt hours of electricity generation to between 6,000 and 9,800 terawatt hours by 2050. They assume that. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a fellow in Finland who will dispute that's even possible. I'll tell you about him in a minute. But of course, advanced reactors are out of the scope. Wind turbines. Well, they talk about onshore and offshore, but onshore they have a more optimistic view that they can contribute significantly from 4.4% of world electricity generation now to 20 to 27% by 2050. And they say, oh, and these are even conservative. In other words, we may be able to do better than that. But of course, advanced nuclear reactors are out of scope. Can't consider that. Now, in conjunction or just prior or in the run-up to the Paris Climate Conference in 2015, a major project was led by the IDDRI, which is an organization in France, and the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which was put together by the United Nations. And these were the leaders of that original work. I highlighted everyone who had a technical degree, and you'll see one engineer in that group. You will see many people who are professionals in economics. That's their website. You want to look it up. The current director is Henry Weisman, who was one of the original members of that first study, and he is has a master's in physics and a PhD in economics. So one of our arguments in the Global Solutions and Outreach programs is someone has to do an engineering analysis of all the different solutions. And a lot of it does come down to engineering. Okay, planting trees, not engineering. Agriculture, you know, there's a problem with the soils and maybe that's not engineering. Buildings, okay, that's the architectural thing. But there is a lot of problems that need good engineering analysis, and we can do better than making assumptions based on hope. Now, the Deep Decarbonization Pathways projects has a lot of credibility, maybe more so than Project Drawdown. In 2018, there were several legal minds that decided we need to take this and we need to figure out how to support it through legal means, you know, something the policymakers can use to promote these solutions. And so this came out in early 2018. One of the editors, John Dernbach, later in 2018 took that rather lengthy report and he came up with a dozen types of legal tools in the toolbox. So this is great, having guidance that policymakers can use to promote solutions. Okay, that's fine. And this goes into a little bit different, a little more detail. I don't know why I put it up there, because anyway, they're confident that they can reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. by at least 80% from 1990 levels down to by 2050. Great. Where's the engineering analysis? I don't know where it is. There's a lot of hope that assumed solutions will work. Now this is a Harvard review done in late 2018. Jesse Jenkins agreed to speak at a session that I chaired in late 2019 at the annual meeting. He, I can tell you right now, is pro-nuclear, just as I am. He and his colleagues reviewed 40 decarbonization studies. Let me see what I was going to point out here. They focus on the electric power sector. And of course, if we're going to electrify, you know, the electric power sector is a pretty important deal. In their conclusion section, they said, they looked at these 40 decarbonization studies, they said, setting aside or eschewing, I'm from Arkansas, I never use the word eschew. You see it over on the right-hand side. That means setting aside. Setting, what does it mean? Anyway, setting aside the development of firm, low-carbon technologies because they face challenges today, you know, okay, they're challenged, so if you set them aside, would amount to betting the planet on the assumption that all of the conditions needed for affordable wind and solar to decarbonize electricity will fall into place. We're just going to bet the farm on solar and wind. And what was Jenkins referring to when he said firm, low carbon technologies? Well, he certainly wasn't. The only firm ways of making electricity, firm meaning you just turn the switch on and you're going to make it. It's reliable. You just turn the plant on and it goes. Burn coal, burn gas, or nuclear. There's only one firm low-carbon way of making electricity, and that's nuclear. So this is, of course, it attracted my attention because I'm pro-nuclear. So this is biased, right? I'm biased. I admit that. So this is Simon Michaud. He's from Australia. He's now in Finland. He has a PhD in, well, it's up there somewhere, but he's an expert in mineralogy. Oh, he's a professor of geometallurgy. Look him up, Google him, and you'll find out that he has done analysis with a focus on Europe, because he's in Europe now. And it's the analysis is, do we have enough mineral reserves to satisfy the needs of the solar solutions and the wind turbine solutions? And you know what the answer is? We don't. The proven reserves cannot do it. Now, he focused on Europe, but his conclusion was we don't have it on the planet. We cannot, if we extrapolate the solar and wind right now for the needs of the whole planet, we don't have enough reserves for one pass, 1 30-year pass. That's it. Now, if you find more sources, you can bank on 10 to 12 years of getting that mining operation up and running. Okay? So the assumption that solar and wind are going to save us might be a little bit weak. You can look up Simon Michaud. Last month, the editors of Bloomberg came out with this article. We can't do it without nuclear. Okay? Just not possible. A few months ago, well, it might have been 8 or so months ago, I was asked to write a paper for the current opinion in chemical engineering. I happened to have met a colleague in Europe, in Hungary, a chemical engineer, and I convinced him that we ought to take a serious look at nuclear, and he's on the editorial board of this. So through him, I got invited, and this is it's now available. It's in the March 2023 issue, but it's now available. My argument is that advanced nuclear, not legacy. Legacy is light water reactors, and that gets a lot of public abuse, opinion abuse. Advanced nuclear reactors is the safest and most renewable clean energy. In my opinion, if we don't plan out at least 200 years, what are we doing? I will have grandchildren. Some of my grandchildren will have grandchildren that live into the early part of next century. I was born in 1950. I think that each of us have a personal connection 200 years out. We ought to at least plan for that far. And if you do all the reading that you can possibly do on solar, wind, Simon Michaud's research on minerals, and legacy nuclear, they're all losers. Legacy nuclear runs out of fuel in 90 years unless they find more uranium. The only thing that can really help us reach the 200-year mark is advanced nuclear. These are section headers of my paper. And by the way, this was peer reviewed. One of the reviewers says, oh, you can't use that title. You can't say that advanced nuclear energy is the safest and most renewable clean energy. That's too crazy. And I said, well, this is an opinion journal, so that's my opinion. So, now another colleague, and he's not the only one, I'm sure, who feels this way. He's a professor at Texas A&M. He said, Tom, there's no work for chemical engineers in nuclear. Just forget it. I mean, how are we going to promote that? And so this is, I think I put this in my conclusion section. I can't remember where I put this. I said I made referred to work in my abstract, but in my conclusion section, I said, okay, here they are. Here are opportunities for chemical engineers. We're not going to read through all that, but there are plenty of opportunities in advanced nuclear. Okay, I like Einstein quotes. Here he said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Okay, so my explanation is on trying to solve, well, first off, for the skeptics, there is a problem. Let's stop talking about whether there's a problem. There's a problem. On the solutions, we have another problem, and that is the decisions made are too heavily influenced on human biases. There's no way you can try to argue it, but you're going to lose the argument. The other is that we need to be concerned for mankind. You know, we've all gone to ethics presentations because we have to have our 1 hour of ethics maintain our P and so on. I think if we engineers do not try to solve global warming, that is an ethical problem. Okay, finally I'm going to get on to global solutions and outreach programs. Okay, so just to return to this, this is once again our plan to try to reach out to impact sectors, those sectors of society, industry, and so on who are affected or will be affected. We're going to have a development committee meeting on January 24th. If you're interested in attending, I can send you an invitation. We have about 70 people now who are expressed interest, and they're invited to that meeting. So in Dick's book, this is what he proposed, 3 projects. The first one is the traditional, we have to reduce CO2 emissions, and we need to adapt. So that's, you know, everybody is thinking along those lines. Project 2, we need to evaluate ways to stabilize and adjust the Earth's energy balance and address ocean acidification and other things. So this falls in the area of an initiative that I became involved in here recently, which is the initiative is called the Foundation for Climate Restoration, which they cite a lot of information, including from the IPCC, that says if we do the best we can between now and 2050 on trying to reduce emissions, which, by the way, is a lot of solar and wind, okay? If we do the best we possibly can, we're not going to reach net zero carbon neutral energy unless we draw down out of the atmosphere many, many, many gigatons of CO2 annually, far beyond what anyone really envisions. I don't know, it's like 10 or 11 gigatons per year. So Project 2, and Dick wasn't aware of this when he wrote his book, but he realized that we need to figure out some way to do that, and that includes that too. And Project 3 is basically improving our monitoring and modeling, and also what projects need to be supported that could be promising technologies. So I'm just going to take you through a quick walk of these 3 projects, and then I'm going to tell you what the budget is to do the work. And we're talking about full-time people working, he framed it out, 3 years. If you got full-time people working 3 years, you're starting to talk money. This is Project 1, once again, mitigation and adaptation for Nation A. There are lots and lots and lots of options that ought to be considered. Solar PV's one, wind is another, and so on and so forth. Ooh, what was that? Somebody over there is controlling it? Okay, okay. So this is the wicked problem approach, and this is what they practiced back in the 1990s in conjunction with the Geneva Convention on Chemical and Biological Terrorism. It is simultaneous work by many teams with central teams to integrate that work and iteration back. It's a loop back to all the teams until they converge onto an acceptable solution. That's all it is. That's what the wicked problem approach is at a national level. Very simple. Now, we engineers can get a little group. Let's say that all of us here decided we're going to figure this out. And then at the end of next week, we'll pass a note to somebody at the door and saying, okay, here's what you got to do, planet Earth, to solve the problem. Who's going to listen to us? Nobody. Now, I'm part of two different engineering groups of old retired engineers, and unfortunately, that's what they think. They talk among themselves and they say, well, you know, this ought to be done, that ought to be done, and you know, and they've been one group has been working on this 14 years. Okay, so we realize that our proposal has to be accepted very widely. So, am I getting 5 minutes? Okay, 5 minutes. So you'll see in the integration teams, and there's more than one team, we will have people who are experts in economics, and what we mean that is macroeconomics at the national level, people who are expert in social sciences and policy. Okay, now we go to projects 1, 2, and 3. Projects 2, there will be international teams that are going to have every nation participate on those teams to figure out how we have to stabilize the Earth's energy balance. And on Project 3, new technologies. All this information is going to feed back to every nation who is going to take that information and improve their action plans for their nations. We decided, Dick and I decided, that we have to have more than just engineers and scientists working on this. And that's where we evolved to having the economic experts and social experts and so on. And it grew into what we call outreach program, where we would have close collaboration in the states with states, communities, and industry. Now, all of this has to work at the global level. So you have all the nations over there on the left, and they're in different regions. They'll be North America, Europe, Asia, and so forth. And of course, their sort of regional concerns are going to be different from region to region. And there'll be integration teams there, and there'll be integration teams at the global level, and all this will be iterating back. Okay, so we're talking a lot of work, and we're talking a lot of money. For the United States, 3 years of work, 380 full-time people, about 3,000 part-time people. Add a little bit of contingency, and we set our budget for $350 million. Okay, when Dick first threw that out at me, I thought, Dick, there's enough old retired guys like me and you, let's just do this in our spare time. Well, he finally convinced me it won't work. I don't have any, you're right. Now, McKinsey & Company is a large management firm. I think they're based somewhere over in Europe. They came out in January last year, and they said, if we're going to solve this global warming problem, it's going to require $275 trillion to be spent by 2050. So, just doing simple math, that means they're going to spend $350 million every 8 hours. Okay? So, my question to you, and this is just about a wind-up now, if we spend $275 trillion between now and 2050 and we don't solve the problem, then what are we going to do? Die. So, conclusions. Global warming is happening at an accelerating rate. Our energy demand is growing. All the people who say, hey, let's just have a reduction in the population, blah, 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 it's all crazy talk. Climate solutions now are built on too much wishful thinking. Human biases affect decisions, and we have to have some way of mitigating them. At a minimum, we need to mitigate the effect of human biases, and the best course of action is to figure out national and regional action plans and then implement them. By the way, everyone who works full-time in the Global Solutions Outreach programs will be in their 20s and 30s, and then once we have the plans, they're going to lead the implementation. That's our proposal. Questions? Yes? Yeah.
First of all, we apologize for running a bit later. So just to make it comfortable and convenient for everyone. If you need to walk out, please feel free to do it now. Everyone who wants to stay, of course, we're going to have another 10 minutes of Q&A, but we're a little bit over our time. Okay, and I'm going to be. Yeah, I have the microphone, so I would like to pass it over to people.
And it's all my fault. I recommended a 5-minute break, and that became a 15-minute break.
Question is, I have lots of questions, but first basic question is, what would you ask the people in this room to do tomorrow and next week?
That's a good question. So,
specific actions.
A specific action is we are holding briefings monthly, and we are trying to get everyone that we can an invitation to those briefings so that they can become aware of our proposal. In one briefing, a few months back, a leader in one initiative, the Foundation for Climate Restoration, caught the vision, and now she is working with us to help us get our proposal in front of Congress. We just have to reach out to as many people as we possibly can and to tell our story. So if you go on our website, and let me see if, actually, how do I get to the front of this thing? I'll put up the website. Oh, so that's the simple thing right now, is to tell people that we're holding briefings. We have had people from, let's see, we had someone from Scotland, Simon Michaud attended from Finland. We had someone from a Scandinavian country, some other place, Africa, and New Zealand. We're just trying to get the word out, so that's the best thing you can do. But I need to show you the website. Let's see. It's up here somewhere, I think. There. Just type in climate-collaboration.com and you'll find it. And on there, you'll see on the main menu briefings.
Thank you. Are you using social media, LinkedIn,
You
Facebook?
know, we are trying to, we hope that we can attract younger people than me, okay, who are good at social media. Kristen Newell is right back here. Kristen, raise your hand. She's a part of our management team, and we really would like, in fact, we were on a call today with this lady, Terry Pugh from the Foundation for Climate Restoration, Terry plus 3 old codgers like me. Well, this fellow here too, he's a little bit younger. and we said, you know, we need to find younger people to do this. So, yeah, the social media, we need to figure out how to do that. But it is hard for old folks who don't use it much. Yeah.
You know that I'm a heretic, right?
Say again?
I'm a heretic.
I know you're a skeptic, Jack. I know you're a skeptic.
Well-
That's okay.
It's a skeptic because, you know, we as engineers try to solve the problems before we state we try to come up with solutions before we state the problem. Now, what I wonder, and I don't know if it's true or not, but what I've seen is that when the Earth tilts from summer to winter, we have in some places 120 degrees difference in the temperature. We also know that the measuring Earth temperatures has a variability of what I've heard about 2.5 degrees. Now, my question is, have we decided that global warming comes from carbon? Why not from the sun? That's a question. There have been various proven facts, like the atmosphere has grown, the Earth atmosphere has grown by a few feet by stellar phenomena. Stellar wind has added to the atmosphere. Those things could cause global warming. You know, I don't know that's true or not true. But what I know is that we haven't put enough effort in deciding that global warming comes from carbon. We're jumping into the solutions of how to get rid of carbon, but I'm not sure that that's the root of the problem.
Well, of course, I'm not an expert in the effect of the CO2 molecule, but there is an effect. Now, would you say that there is no effect, or?
No, I'm not saying that there's any effect. I think that probably if you do a model in the laboratory, you're going to find that CO2 traps more energy.
Okay.
But I don't think that the models are so complex. The largest problem for global warming is water vapor, not CO2.
Okay, that's and water vapor is a feedback greenhouse gas, not a forcing.
Chicken or the egg? Okay.
This is a whole discussion that I'm not expert at, but I've read enough to convince myself that CO2 does have this effect. So.
Okay, that's it. Bias.
Thank you. Assuming that it is CO2. I read 2 years ago, Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates both stopped investing in alternative power and put all their money on what you're saying, on nuclear research. So being that all their millions are now going towards that kind of research, I would think that we're closer to a nuclear solution.
It is complicated in that, and they're doing the right thing. They're putting it into advanced nuclear. I don't recall exactly what Bezos is doing, but of course Gates is working on a molten salt design in an old coal plant in Wyoming. It has to be advanced. We only have 90 years of proven reserves of uranium to continue doing the legacy nuclear.
Okay. And about the answer, to answer that question of what would you do immediately, personally, I think the best thing we could do is stop eating meat.
Stop what?
Eating meat.
Next time we have vegetarian meals.
Great presentation, Tom, as usual. I had a thought that there are three countries and one region which account for the vast majority, I don't know the exact percentage, but it's around 80% of CO2 emissions. That's the US, China, India, and EU. EU is a regional, the others are countries. US, of course, has a lot of skeptics and all that, but in China, there aren't any. Those who dare to be skeptics soon disappear.
Ah. Okay.
India doesn't have skeptics, even though it's a democracy. And EU is, by and large, on the same track, the very limited amount of skepticism. So what if we say, forget all these out of 193 countries in the UN, just focus on 4. You get 80% of it. It can be done because these are big countries with strong government infrastructure, and they can pull it off. And forget about Vanuatu and Fiji and Monaco and all these other countries which are members of the UN. I think these are the industrialized countries which have potential to do something big. It's the, what is it, that statistical thing, the 80-20 rule, okay? What? Pareto principle, that's right. I think that's something to think about, okay? And I'm very interested in joining your discussion group. I've got presentations that I've made to universities in India, for example, on exactly these kind of issues. They tend to be very superficial in some ways because you only can have 2 or 3 slides per issue. And I would like to get that into the hands of the people who are going to be in the January 24 discussion ahead of time so they can review it and come prepared.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll send you an invitation for January 24.
Please do.
This young lady right here who came with me, you had a question, Mary? Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. You got to use the microphone.
Okay, not so much a question, but just to understand it. Old-fashioned nuclear is where you have so much nuclear waste.
Right,
And then you have the nuclear waste problem.
right.
Advanced nuclear, you can use more of the waste so you don't have all that waste.
Right.
Is that correct? That's the whole idea about you.
You can use that waste. It's not real simple, but you can use it. Companies, universities, governments are working on it.
But the idea of using it is so that you don't have that waste.
Yes,
sitting
you can
around
reduce the legacy
contaminating
waste
everything,
problem.
right?
Yeah,
You don't want it sitting around contaminating.
Yeah.
Even if it's harder to use it up,
right.
it's worth it.
Okay, go ahead and pass the microphone.
I mean,
Yeah,
is that the idea?
that is one of the benefits. Just, Mary, you just got to read the paper I wrote, okay? Yes.
My name is Errol Eccles, and I don't fall into one of these 7 sections, but I do like to talk about the bias because I think there is bias, both sides and maybe inside, outside, you name it. I probably fall in the 0th category. That is the category where I just don't know what I don't know. And it's hard to solve a problem when you don't know what the problem is. Some people might think there's a problem because they have a bias towards a problem, and some people might think there's no problem because they have a bias that way. I like the fact that you plotted the temperatures, the blue dots, Ms. Mary, and the question I have for you on those blue dots, you mentioned NOAA. I don't know what NOAA is, but if somebody measured a temperature in 200 years ago, was it accurate?
Well,
Was it
Yeah,
appro-
temperatures have been determined through proxy measurements, looking at other physical evidence when you go farther back. But 200 years ago, people were actually taking measurements. In fact, in the NOAA database, you can find temperatures measured back into the 1700s in the U.S.
And that's where I was going. Yeah, 200 years ago, how about 400 years ago? How about 600 years ago? I don't know. I'm not biased one way or the other, by the way. I'm at the 0th position. I just don't know. And with that ignorance, I can't be on the denied part or the not serious part or the serious part. And I think there are some people who are in that position. How do you get them from that position using data? Because as engineers, that is what we're about. We can pontificate as much as we want, but what does the data say?
You know, I appreciate that question. I think that when these global plots come out, it's very easy to say, where did they come up with this information? I think, Jack, you even said that maybe the precision of atmospheric temperatures is, iffy. And then this guy said 5 years ago, hey, it's always been hot in Texas. So I just went to, they have a temperature measurement instrument in Amarillo or wherever it is, and they measure it. It's measured over the years, and anybody can go to NOAA. The data is very easy to get and just plot it up. The temperature's going up everywhere. Now, we've been able to measure temperatures pretty accurately for a long, long, long time. We don't need satellites to measure them. People do that with instruments on the ground all the time. Now, there was a fellow named Fred Singer. Anybody know that name? Okay. Unfortunately, he's died a few years ago in his 90s. If humanity survives, he's going to be a villain, because he wrote a book and he said, they got that instrument right next to air conditioner, a hot air conditioner, or some other crazy stuff. Taking these little tiny cherries, but we have thousands of meteorological stations over the U.S. If you go to just about any of them and plot them up, you're going to see a temperature rise. You're going to see a temperature rise. Anyway.
Okay, I'm going to give the last question because we're running out of time. Do we have any online questions?
Hey, Tom. So I really like the presentation. Hey, Tom. I really like the presentation. I worked in a nuclear fuel plant for 1 year, so I exactly know.
Talk a little bit louder.
So
I need a hearing aid, but
I worked in a nuclear fuel plant for 1 year, so I'm kind of familiar with the nuclear process production. So for nuclear production, we need ores. You're saying that uranium is existing for 90 years, and I don't know what the zirconium and all other components are. I'll combine my questions, two questions into one. So as an engineer, we should be thinking about long-term, right? Just not limited to 90 years. So what would be the extension of our solution after the ores? And with the ores, for crude can be recreated in probably a couple of 100 years. Ores, it takes probably 1 million years or so. Are we creating another problem with mining for the ores, trying to solve a problem for CO2 emission?
okay, so if I understood you correctly, so 90 years is if we stick with legacy, light water reactors, because only 3% of the fuel is fissile, breaks up, can break up. The rest of it is fertile. You cannot make it break and get energy from that. A breeder reactor will hit the fertile elements with a neutron and turn it into a fissile element, which will then break apart. So we go from 3% utilization of the raw material to not 100%, but 20, 30 times higher, okay? So now, okay, 30 times 90 is 2,700 years, okay? That's just using uranium. Thorium is a fertile element that can be converted into a fissile element. There's thorium technology out there. So you can go to the 2,700 just on what I said, and then add a few more hundreds, perhaps thousands of years on thorium. And in advanced reactors, if you use the so-called waste nuclear material, that is raw material for the advanced. So I think you could go out 10,000 years. And coincidentally, by the way, in 10,000 years, the next major ice age is going to happen. So those people are going to have a different problem.
All right, so with this very nice joke, I guess, and answer to many questions, I would like to conclude the meeting. Let's thank our speaker once more. See you next month.